Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. My name is Sandhya. I'm one of the co-directors of the Universal Income Project, and this is Jim on the other end, another co-director. So I'll do a brief introduction about Universal Income Project, why we decided to have this panel, introductions of our lovely panelists, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So first, Universal Income Project. So we are a volunteer-powered organization. We are harnessing the efforts of supporters across the country to help raise awareness about and support for universal basic income. Right now, most people in the United States still don't know what this concept is, right? If we're ever going to have a chance to enact an idea like this, we need to make sure that there's a strong popular movement that's going to be supporting this idea. And the only way that that happens is if we have supporters step up. So we host a lot of events here in the Bay Area and are starting to do so around the country that brings supporters together, gives them an opportunity to advance the idea of basic income through what we call basic income projects. So these are collaborative, creative projects that help people learn about basic income and show support for the idea. So examples include like making shareable graphics that talk about the benefits of basic income, a simple website explaining the fundamentals of what is basic income, writing a short story on what the future might look like if everyone in the US had a basic income, or whatever creative idea you come up with. We've also been hosting events like this in the Bay Area over the last couple of months to continue the conversation. So let's talk about the motivation for the panel tonight. A lot of the conversation, especially here so far on basic income, has been focused on automation and its effects on future jobs and unemployment. But we haven't heard quite as much from the people that work with the populations that are most likely to be immediately affected by a universal basic income. So tonight we've assembled a panel of experts on social service work from around the Bay Area. First, Paul Perry. As Executive Director of the Bay Area campus of the Reset Foundation, Paul brings expertise as a teacher, administrator, and school designer to his work. Most recently, Paul was part of a team that designed and launched 3 new competency-based high schools within the New York City Department of Education, the nation's largest school district. Prior to that launch, Paul served as assistant principal in Boston and worked with the Los Angeles Unified School District on professional development for teachers and principals. Paul has a dual degree in political science and international studies, master's degrees in education and public policy from the University of Pennsylvania and University of California, Berkeley, and a doctorate of education leadership from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Okay, next, Darcel Jackson is the founder, Paul is executive director of the Reset Foundation. Darcel Jackson is the founder at Shelter Tech. After Darcel was injured and lost his job as a welder working on the New Bay Bridge, he became homeless. He realized that the longer he stayed in that condition, the harder it would become to escape it. He managed to find and take cooking classes, start a catering company, and escape poverty. Now, Darcel has started Shelter Tech to help people who are where he was find the resources they need to get their lives back. Shelter Tech aims to create tech-driven solutions for low-income, homeless, and underserved people. Since 2015, Shelter Tech has equipped 1 shelter and 7 SROs with free Wi-Fi, providing more than 1,000 underserved people with access to the internet. In 2016, they're building Ask Darcel, an app that leverages access to smartphones and Wi-Fi to provide those in need with a virtual case manager guiding users through a step-by-step process to improve their lives. Rose Broom is the founder and CEO of Hand Up. So Rose is passionate about using the power of technology to create social change. She came up with Hand Up after passing a woman sleeping on the street in the winter of 2012 and wanted to see a new way to give. Previously, Rose served as COO at Super Better Labs and as a data manager for Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. In 2015, Hand Up won the Webby Award for Best Charity People's Voice, and Rose was listed in the top 100 people in tech by Business Insider. Next, we have Millicent Johnson, manager at SF Gives at Tipping Point Community. Millicent has spent her career working on economic empowerment. Her current work focuses on leading a coalition of companies committed to building a better Bay Area through their collaborative philanthropic efforts. She advises companies on CSR strategy, convenes monthly roundtable discussions between policy, nonprofit, and corporate leaders, and works to create new initiatives and resources that can help the corporate sector engage in innovative and meaningful philanthropy. Then we have Alan Williams, who's the design lead at Code for America's SNAP team. Alan is an urban planner turned product designer. Before joining Code for America, he led the community team at Neighborhood, a civic ideation platform. You got to start working with the Web at Civic Center, a New Orleans creative studio that blends art, education, and urban planning to help people navigate and improve their cities. He currently leads user research and product design on Code for America's Snap team. So if you'll join me in giving our panelists a hand.
Thanks, Sandhya. Yeah, thanks again to everyone for being here. Really excited about the discussion tonight. So just to kind of give folks a sense for how we're going to approach this, I'm going to have a few questions for the panelists. And I want to encourage everyone to have conversations amongst yourselves. If you have a thought that you want to share, respond to someone else, please do so. After that, we'll open up to questions from the audience and see where the conversation goes. So to start out with, basic income has been picking up a fair amount of steam in the media over the last year. Are there people talking about it in the spaces that you're working in? And if so, what are they saying? Let's just go down the line. Alan?
Sure. So few, very few, at least in the traditional social services, human services world. The topics of conversation related to technology and policy change that dominates people's conversation is mostly still ACA implementation and the big wrenching changes that went along with that. However, among the people that are dipping their toe in the world of technology here in San Francisco, there is a little bit of growing awareness among traditional policy people that
In the philanthropic sector, I would also say not so much. I think an interesting conversation is arising though among nonprofits in the philanthropic sector, and that's really around employment. For a long time, anybody who's been working in poverty has really focused on employment or a job that provides a sustainable living wage as kind of a marker of success about whether or not people have been successful in program and are able to transition out of poverty. And I think for so many of the communities that we work in and with, mainly low-income communities, communities of color, they were kind of the OG, original gig economy workers, right? They were piecing together lots of different types of work in order to be supported. And so as the gig economy rises and as people find work in different ways, there is this question of whether or not a single job with sustainable wage is the right measure, or whether or not we should be focusing on making sure that people have enough income, not only to survive, but thrive. And so I think that that is maybe a corollary conversation that could lead both of those worlds into thinking about universal basic income.
So I'd say in the human services communities that we work with, definitely we do not hear a lot of discussion about the basic income. And when I talk with folks about it, because I think it's such an interesting and compelling idea, I hear people say things like, "Oh yeah, like that's the dream, right?" Or "Yeah, that was popular in the '70s, but could that ever really happen?" And I think a lot of the folks we work with are very, very focused on serving the clients and communities that they're engaged with and that they're serving. And so bringing this conversation and expanding this conversation to folks who are working with individuals experiencing homelessness is really important to me. And I'll just add one last thing on that. You're seeing this change sort of focus on income instead of just, a singular job. And what I see is a shift toward housing first as a philosophy in the homeless services community that's gaining a lot of popularity. And so we do see new movements in this community, and I think the basic income might be one a little bit later, but we need more big ideas like this.
Hello, everyone. I'm just so proud of y'all sitting out there listening to this. I think it's a great thing. I think that there's a lack of a foundation. When people fall, you're supposed to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, where you have friends and family that can help you. Well, what has happened here is that foundation that we usually fall on, our parents or friends and families, they're not here. They were gentrified and they're not here for us to lean on. So I think it'll be a great foundation to build on. That I was fortunate enough to have a foundation to build on, the education that I had, the training that I had. I had a little pension that I got, and I was able to rebuild off that. I knew I needed to be retraining, and there were resources out there that I was able to tap into. So I think it's a good platform to build on, where people have something to lean on and get back into the mainstream of society. I mean, you guys don't know, some of the most interesting and educated people I met were in that shelter. They just need something to build on and stuff. You know, if you fall down and there's just no end to it, you know, you don't have that basic income where you can rebuild yourself. That's a beautiful thing. Usually we got that from our parents or a friend or somebody that says, hey man, let me just help you get up and get back on your feet. So if we had that, you know, that what we're talking about there, it'd be a great thing. It can happen. It can happen because of people like you that take interest in it and say, hey, we need this, let's just do it. And we live in one of the richest cities in the world. You know, we can make that happen. You know, we have a tax base of about, what, $8 billion a year. You know, we can end homelessness tomorrow if the political will was there.
Yeah, I think there's two things. So one quick thing about Reset is that we're alternative to incarceration for young men 18 to 24 years old. So we work with the court system to divert young men from otherwise going to prison or jail into a residential learning community, essentially. So big picture, I think there's like a big opportunity for innovations to start outside of the public sector and then sort of spin in. And some of the models that, you know, some of the articles we looked at before this panel reference that, of how you know, things have been tested and tried and could eventually be expanded. So I think there's a lot of fertile ground for that. Some of the paid for success models potentially. And then in our perspective, I think there's like a big thing around case management. So we basically try to like hack a basic income for young men who have been in our program 18 to 30 months and give them on-campus job opportunities, internships, career opportunities, where they're walking out with, you know, $5,000 to $10,000 of a basic income, essentially, based on the work they've done on our campus. It's not the like, you know, $100 and a bus ticket at the Greyhound that typically constitutes reentry in our country. So we're trying to sort of give them some you know, semblance of a basic income as the reentering communities, and also they're entering with like job skills and high school diploma. So
that's great. So we've touched on this a little bit, but I'd be curious to hear from all the panelists, what would it be like if we actually had a basic income? How would the communities you're working with actually be affected? Like, how would things be different? Maybe go backwards this time.
Sure. I mean, short answer. So to answer the first question, which I realized I didn't answer, is no. I haven't heard people talking about it. And then the second, answer the second question, we wouldn't have to pay for it anymore. So we're paying for it out of our own pockets as a nonprofit that raises money philanthropically and is starting to get money from the government. And I think it'd be huge, you know, if we had someone who went through our program and, you know, say they get contact with the criminal legal system and they go through our program and then they're walking out with $10,000 or $15,000 like in their pocket to start a new life. Like, that's huge, you know, that change, that's a game changer. So I think that'd be really powerful from our perspective, and would ease the burden on, I think, a lot of social service providers to fill that gap and to, you know, provide that service.
I'm kind of fortunate. I volunteer with an organization, and I engage the homeless community on a daily basis, and we give them what we call a stipend. And I see them come to work. You know, there's about 25 or 30 of them that come to work, and you know, they put on their little uniform. They're so proud that they're earning a living. But I can guarantee you, if we gave them $600 a day, they'd still come because they're proud of giving back to the community. The community.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Giving back to the community that they live in, you know, it's sort of an empowerment, you know, that they belong, you know, and then, you know, the tourists come around and they ask them questions. How do you get, where's City Hall? And it's right around the block, you know. Oh, it's over there, you know. You know, people engage them instead of looking down on them. They're looking up to them, you know. Hey, you must be a part of this thing we call San Francisco, because you have on a shirt, you know, that has an official name on it, and it's very humbling, and I'm so proud of when they come to work. So, you know, I think if they got that basic income, it would be a great thing, you know. That's the foundation that's missing, where your parents say, well, here's $10,000, go start your life. A lot of people don't have that, or never have it, or never will. So if they had something like that that they can build on, they're builders. They will build on that and go up to the next level. Because I see it every day. They come to us, downtrodden and everything. And after a few days, they're holding their heads up high, and just representing and stuff. And I almost want to break down in tears every morning when I go to work. That's why I go. They don't pay me a lot of money. It's sort of a volunteer thing. But I've missed a day. I showed up every day just for that show of these homeless folks showing up, giving back to the community. It's a great thing.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, it would be revolutionary to have a basic income. People are poor because they don't have money. And we can end poverty by giving people money. And I think, like other people have said, we live in a society with so much wealth, and to walk past people who are sick and injured on the streets, I think that's wrong. And I think that it will improve not only, homeless individuals' lives and people in poverty improve their lives, but it will improve the health of the whole community and our mental health as well. So with Hand Up, people who are homeless can raise money on our platform on handup.org. And so we know what people will use their basic income on. We see what people are raising money for: housing, food, medical care, education, technology. It's very important, technology. And sometimes the simplest thing can make a difference in someone's life. They have a job and they can't get there. They need a bus pass. People need a small thing to connect them to a bigger opportunity. So, I think the basic income gives people that platform by which to, launch their lives in a new direction, pursue their passions, connect with their communities. And I think it would be a wonderful, beautiful day when we have a basic income.
I would just add, I think when we talk about poverty, I just want to break that down a little bit, because for the federal poverty line, what we're talking about right now, for an individual is $12,000. So if you make above $12,000, you are considered not in poverty by the federal government. And for a family of four, it's $24,000 a year. And in the Bay Area, something that we like to look at Tipping Point, we fund 45 nonprofits throughout the Bay Area that are addressing poverty in different ways. And our organizations kind of help people get to a self-sufficiency line, which for an individual is around $30,000 a year, and for a family of four is closer to $80,000 a year. Which is good. I think we can all agree that people should just have better than that, than both of those lines, but that's where we are. And so I think for so many people, to Darcel's point, I think people who don't need to fall into poverty because life happens to them. So to get to the self-sufficiency standard, a family of four would have to work 4 minimum wage jobs here in the Bay Area just to make ends meet, just to get your basic needs met. And so people do it. And if somebody gets sick, if they lose their job, if they get evicted, they're in shelter, they lose everything. And that just doesn't have to happen. We don't need to have that in our community. And at the same time, when they do go to amazing organizations like Reset and other places, they come through those doors, and not only do they not have their basic needs yet met, they also have all of the baggage that comes with poverty, because poverty is traumatic. It makes sure that you are more likely to experience violence, that you have less access to food, housing, education, or quality education opportunities. It ensures that you won't live as long as people than two zip codes over from you. And it ensures that your children will probably also end up in poverty. And so having a basic income, I think, would help keep people kind of from falling into the trauma that is poverty. And then also, I think it's incredible that we require organizations like the ones on this panel to not only help get people the skills that they need to transform their lives, but then also to lift them out of poverty. And we expect our nonprofits who are under-resourced to do both of those things at the same time. And so I think, again, I don't think universal basic income is a silver bullet, but the ability to lighten the load on nonprofit organizations to just be able to provide the services that they were designed to provide without all the other ancillary things that happen when somebody is in poverty would be a game changer.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the things that are said. 45 million people are in poverty in America, so that's like 1 out of 6. There's about 50 million people on food stamps, so it's poverty plus a little bit. And just thinking about the question, as you said, the people that we work with at Code for America, the product is an easier way to get and keep food stamps. And it's all kinds of people. I mean, it is literally as diverse as the state of California. And food stamps is a incredibly impactful thing for people. Like you said, what are people spending money on? They're spending money on food, they're spending on housing, spending on technology, they're spending on the basics, the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. And so it would be a tremendously impactful program to have something that was less restricted, that they could spend as they saw fit at the moment that they need to spend it. We have one of the ways that we help people keep food stamps is a way to check their balance, which you currently can't do unless you like navigate a phone tree or buy a test banana, which is what a lot of people do to like get the balance on the end of their receipt. And what a lot of people, when people text at the end of the month, they're like anxious. They're anxious for their deposit. And they're anxious for their deposit because they don't want to spend the money that they have on food because that they're going to get food stamps to spend on food. And so if they spend the money on food now, then they can't spend the food stamps that they get on housing or medicine or whatever it may be that they need that day or that their family needs that day. And so giving people the agency to spend it as they need and as they see fit, I think would be a tremendous improvement. I do worry, though, if you have a guaranteed income on a regular basis that's something like an annuity stream of income that you can rely on, people will find a way to prey on the people receiving that income. There's all sorts of people out there that are offering payday loans at really, really damaging rates. There's people that are exploiting people's financial situation in myriad ways. And one thing I think a lot of people in the human services community are interested to hear more about is from this community is how we protect the people that do have financial precarity, and we kind of have a system for doing that now. It's not great, but what's next?
Yeah, it's a great point. Hello. Great point about thinking through like what are the repercussions and possible scenarios that might pop up. So a question for any of the panelists who want to answer. One, basic income would be very expensive. To actually provide everyone with an income that's enough to survive on would cost a tremendous amount of money. So if we were to move ahead with this, there's going to be a lot of pressure to replace existing programs if folks feel like they are no longer as necessary. I'd be curious to hear from folks, what are there programs that you think just wouldn't necessarily make sense or be necessary anymore? And are there others that might initially seem like they might not be necessary, but if we were to get rid of them, there might be unintended consequences?
Yeah, so there's two big buckets Well, there's probably many different ways you can slice it, but there's insurance programs, health insurance programs, unemployment insurance, social security insurance. I can't imagine that those would be things that a basic income could take the place of. But when it comes to things like CalWorks, which is a program that has lots of different requirements in order to get some cash aid, general assistance here in San Francisco. Probably food stamps is the closest thing to in scope to what a basic income might approximate, and then of course the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is only available to working families, but is essentially, from my understanding of basic income, is maybe the closest possible parallel.
So this question is challenging for me. I'll say that I think basic income will most benefit working individuals and families who need a buffer so that they don't fall into poverty. And I think that's great. And I think it'll free up our social systems to help the people who really, really need intensive help and services. What I do not think that it will do is help, I think, the most vulnerable among us. And actually, I mean, I just think about friends of mine or folks with kids. They'll spend, especially even low-income people, will spend $20,000 a year on childcare alone, right? And that's not food, that's not an apartment or anything like that. So I think the idea that we do away with some of those basic benefits, I think is probably, I don't know, I think it's a little unrealistic. However, I think that you could have an incredible cost savings by helping people who are just on the line of having to qualify for those services or not have to use those services, so that there could be both cost savings and more assets for people. The other thing that I would say, though, because I think this question kind of comes up a lot in this dialogue, like, okay, we could just get rid of all social services, is that I think that there's kind of a utopian, dystopian version of how universal basic income plays out, right? And in the utopian version, in my mind, it's our society saying every person deserves the right to a basic quality of life and to have life happen to them and not have that end their lives, meaning they have some sort of safety net. And just to be clear, we don't have a safety net right now. And I think, where is it going with this? Yeah, so the dystopian version, thank you. The dystopian side of this is that, we can cash out our social contract and our responsibility to address the racial and class and all the types of isms that have led us to this point, and our responsibility to both protect and support the most vulnerable among us and to address those systemic issues. And so this isn't a way to write a check and get out of that, but this is a supplement, a buffer, I think, to going a step towards what I think we all want, which is a more equitable and just society. How do I follow that?
I don't think your intention was for all of us to answer, but I'm just going to add one perspective on this that, as many of you know, basic income is being voted on in Switzerland and, in Denmark and one city there. And I think we're going to learn a lot as we see other countries try this, and we're going to learn, what works and what doesn't. And I think right now, it's definitely important to talk about the intentions, like you were saying, but also just build the movement and start getting some of those models detailed out a little bit more. So, I don't know if you guys have any burning for that.
I'd say look out, poverty pimps, because they're going to have to go. It'll work itself out you know, those entities that aren't doing the job, they'll go away. It'll kind of adjust itself. Those services that aren't doing a good job, they'll go away, and those that are doing a good job will stay. You know, Yellow Cab didn't go away because Uber showed up. You know what I mean? Some people prefer one, and some people prefer the other. It'll make a natural adjustment. But one thing, you know, there's some worry. Well, what would they do with this and everything? Everybody look to the person to the left. The other left. No. That's the homeless community out there. There's resourceful people. You know, they get a lot done on a little bit of money. So if they got a basic income that's more than what they got, they'll make adjustments and they'll just live better. And, you know, there's people that'll do wrong things with it, and there's people that'll do right things with it, you know, but the wrong are a minority, as they are in general society. We don't live in a country where everybody's a tyrant. We have a few tyrants and a whole bunch of good people that keep the tyrants at bay. So there are a lot of good and educated people that are in that community. They just hit a stump in the road. I would say that 40% of the homeless community basically just hit a bump in the road. They can case manage themselves out of homelessness if the resources were there. Then you got, you know, these people that signed up for the military to catch a bullet, and they went over there and they came back differently than they went. You know, they're suffering from post-traumatic stress, and we have the people that are getting kicked out of the mental health institutions and stuff. We have those people wandering the streets and everything. They need looking after, you know, so if they got a basic income, they probably need to get somebody to help them manage their funds, you know, as normal society does. You know, there's people out there that worked all their life and then they go off the deep end, and they have to have somebody, you know, maybe their children or case manage their funds and stuff. So that the homeless community is a direct reflection of this community that we see right out here. There's good, bad, and there's ugly, you know what I'm saying? And I just hate the people that say those, oh, they're all using drugs. You know, they're not all using drugs. You know, if I cut every one of you in the arm, you go to the doctor and say, give me something to kill the pain. The trauma that these people suffer, you know, you might want to have a drink or get high too because it hurts so bad. You know, you worked all your life and you had a house, and, you know, now you don't have your house and you don't have food to eat. That's trauma. That's real trauma, you know, so they need, some of them need to medicate or get some kind of counseling. They're people, they have feelings and stuff. So don't say they're all drug addicts or they're all crazy. They're not all crazy. They're just normal people that had a traumatic experience and stuff. And that basic income would be great, you know, and I don't want, you know, when I give $1, you know, my first wife, I used to give people money when I see them on the street. She said, don't give them that money. They're going to go get high. Well, it ain't you know, my heart tells me to give it to them. What they do with it is their business. They may need it. That guy I give this $1 to may need a drink, you know. Sometimes I need a drink, you know. I see some of y'all, you know, the little wine bottles over there is empty, you know what I'm saying? You know, they're no different than you, and you. That's why I asked you to look to the person at your left. They're just people, human beings. And see what I'm saying? They're just people like you, you know, they're just normal. You know, I've become sort of the poster board for homeless people, you know, and I get people to say, I want to meet one of them. One of who? I want to meet a homeless person. I said, hey, just walk up to one instead of giving $1, say, hey, let's go have lunch and talk to them. You know, they want to know what, you know, who they are, what they are. Every one of them has a different story. And that's why, you know, with the app that I developed, you put your profile in, your age, your education and stuff, and it spits back out the resources that can help you, because every single one of them are different. They're just as different as this panel is up here, you know. And that's the biggest problem I got with the shelter committee. You know, I stayed in the shelter 8 months, and 2 days before I was getting ready to leave, a case manager showed up. Oh, let me give you some case management. I'm like, I'm ready to go now. I believe that the first day you walk in that shelter, they need to sit you down, find out who you are, what you are, and what got you there, and what's it going to take to get you out. In my case, I was an iron worker. I was an iron worker for 25 years, and then this bubble burst. I never seen that bubble, but it did burst. And I was out of a job. I exhausted all of my assets, and, you know, I decided to send my kids. I promised them to send them to college, You know, I could have took that money and kept my housing, but I thought it was more important to send my daughter to nursing school and my son to the Los Angeles Music Institute. So I ended up in the shelter. I just didn't have any money after I gave it all to him. I'm hoping they paid me back. But I gave them that money so that they can go to school and they can get a chance in life. So I sacrificed. But what I needed was I had to change. I couldn't weld anymore, hang off 30-story buildings and weld anymore. You know, so I went to chef school. I found one that was free. So I had to retrain myself. And, you know, that's what changed. It was a life-changing experience. Now, I'm doing a catering on the 28th at the mayor of San Jose's house. He's giving me $50 a plate. I ain't seen a $50 plate yet, but I'm still charging it to him. I normally charge about $10 a plate here, even less recently, but I'm going down there and get this man and his guests $50 plates of whatever they want. You know? But the thing is, yeah, that's what I'm doing. If you had a basic income, what they do with it is really not our business. Oh, it's really not our business. You know, we just hope they do the right thing with it. And some people, like this gentleman said, will abuse it, or outside organizations will figure out a way to take advantage of them and get the money and everything. But think about the majority of people that we get to help get back on their feet and get their lives straight. We just save one. That's a beautiful thing.
So the framing of the question is interesting to me, because I think there's, like, we're talking about offsetting, right? So like, what do we have to get rid of that's going to a certain population because something else is going to that population? But before we talk about that, I'm sort of interested in how do we get rid of, you know, or how do we change like the cap on Social Security tax? You know what I mean? As a way to offset, you know, how do we talk about like the mortgage interest tax deduction has become a mechanism for gentrification and was you know, essentially like fueled white flight, and now is allowing the children of white flight to come back into these communities and gentrify the shit out of these communities. So like, you know, I think let's talk about all the different giveaways that we have, the Panama Papers and the tax loopholes for corporate entities and things like that, before we talk about taking people's food stamps and unemployment insurance and all this other stuff. If basic income exists, I just think I'm interested in like attacking those little pieces of offsets rather than, you know, what I see as a form of reparation, frankly, you know, for communities that like deserve that money. Their ancestors worked for that money. They never got that money. And now basic income is a way to get them that money. That's how we think about it at Reset, in terms of repurposing money from the criminal justice system, which is an extension of Jim Crow and, you know, chattel slavery, into people's pockets as reparation. So I think there's just there's so many structures that we should attack as offsets to something like basic income before we even talk about basic social services to the people receiving basic income.
Yeah. Yeah, the frame that you brought to that question is really important. The experience that I was bringing to my concern is one where it feels like, to make any change, the people that are the beneficiaries have to negotiate with a set of institutions that are getting a different set of benefits. And the example that always sticks out in my mind is that currently in California, or last year in California, I think it was $20 million in TANF went to ATM fees. And so JP Morgan was the biggest beneficiary of those ATM fees. And it feels like any big change is going to be a threat. And the work needs to start now to try and figure out what those threats are, what the needs that people have really are, so that when we replace something complex that's built up over many, many years, lots of negotiation, lots of coalition building, lots of, fighting, really, isn't replaced with something clean slate that's fragile, and instead actually continues to be a safety net rather than just money in your pocket.
My question is, why do you got to take something away because you give them something? You know, the biggest thing with this organization I volunteer for, when people come on board, is it going to affect my GA, or is it going to affect my SSI or my SSD? And we give it to them in a stipend so it doesn't affect that. No, you get this on top of what you already get. We don't want to take anything away from what you have. So every time society decides to give a group of people, which are usually disadvantaged people, something, they want to take away something. Why you want to take away something? Just why can't go on top of what you already have? Why can't they get the medical benefits that they already have and then get this extra money? Why can't they keep the money that they're getting, which in San Francisco, if you're on GA, it's only $62, you know. And they tell you, those people come all the way from across the country to be homeless in San Francisco. Come on, $62, that is not the reason, you know. And most of these, 71% of them were here and went homeless, you know. So let's enough of that talk about, oh, if we give you this, a basic income, then we're going to take away the other basic income you got or the food stamps you got. Why can't people just get more and live better? You know, let's take care of the human race, all right?
So Rose mentioned earlier that basic income is a radical idea, and it's going to be a while before it's even a remote possibility. But for that to happen, we probably need a pretty powerful popular movement behind the idea if we have any chance of making it through. So what would it take to get the communities that you work with involved in pushing forward this idea? For any?
Oh, Jackson. District 9.
I would say, I mean, thing that I think any movement can realize bring them under an umbrella. And I think for the work that Universal Basic Income is doing, there are actually already kind of similar things that the philanthropic world and the nonprofit world have supported. So, for example, there's individual development accounts or IDAs, a community of folks that really development is the key to kind of moving people out of poverty. In programs, they save a certain amount of money, their money is matched, and that once they leave, to kind of Paul's, that can really help buffer them as they transition into the world, and that they can continue to keep and build so that they have that. I think that's a key and supportive community. I think the leaders of this movement sit around a table that have done a lot of advocating for this, because it's going to take both sides. It's movement to push this forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that. Creating space for this conversation with the broader community is such an important part of it. A lot of people care and would want to be an active voice in this. And just like this panel is so fascinating to me, even being here on it, that how often do you hear this kind of discussion around the basic income? And like, let's create more like this and welcome in different leaders. So yeah, thanks for doing the first step of, bringing a lot of different groups together.
How many of y'all live in San Francisco by raising hand? You live in a powerful city. How many of y'all know 5 people that you can influence to say they'll do something just because you say do it? Well, you don't have very good friends. I mean, how many of y'all know one person that'll do something because you asked them in an endearment way and they'll do it? That's how you get this ball rolling. You take that one person, and then that one person finds one person, and it just snowballs into something else. And we live in a very wealthy city. I can give a damn about Switzerland, Alaska, what they're doing over here. Let's just do it right here and make it happen.
All right, I'd like to open it up to some questions from the audience. Who has a question for the panel? Right here?
So we've been debating on basic income.
We will people do that, but I'll repeat the question.
What's that?
Just introduce yourself, or like if you want to share. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to speak loud. Do you feel like a basic income would be more useful to people to get once a month or a large sum every year? So people have kind of, like you were talking about, the starting base to move on.
So the question was, would basic income be more useful to get once a month or just one big upfront amount to give you a big amount to start with?
I'd be cool with my 40 acres.
It's so funny. So it's super expensive in this country to be poor. Poor people pay more for everything because they don't have the upfront capital. So for example, with your BART card, right? Most of us can afford maybe a monthly pass, but for people in poverty, they're paying every single day, every single month, and they can't have those savings. The same thing with Pampers and other types of things. So I am definitely in favor of, I don't know, I just formed that opinion, but I think I'm in favor of a lump sum just to allow people to actually plan to buy the things that they need to support their children in the way that they need to support them, as opposed to, again, I think rationing out in a way that people who live in poverty have had to ration forever.
I haven't really thought about this that much, but I mean, there are pros and cons to both. And one pro of the lump sum that's coming to mind is the Give Directly model, giving $1,000 to folks in rural Africa, and they're able to use that to buy expensive things like a new roof or a motorcycle, that having that lump sum lets them do. But I'd say it'd be great to look at more research on this, if anyone.
You know, a lot of my friends never had a large sum of money at one time. You know, to get a check for $10,000, that'd be like hitting the lottery. And some of them probably wouldn't do the right thing with it. So I would give them $10,000 and then give them monthly payments to sustain themselves. So I think both. As a matter of fact, give them 2 lump sums and a monthly thing.
I guess I'd be in the lump sum camp. I think, I think there's a pernicious belief that like people who figure out a way to like feed 5 children on like $10 a day or something like that don't know how to manage their money. When in fact, that's like the quintessence of understanding how to manage money. So, they're resourceful people. So, and also it's a weird form of like, I don't know, dissonant elitism that we're like, yeah, I have large sums of money to like lean on and the capital that Millicent was talking about. But I think these people should really have month to month and like, cause they gotta, so like, I just think it's not, that's problematic that like we're able to sort of leverage capital ourselves as the quote unquote elite or people who have those resources, but then say, these folks need a more managed system. So I think, and the whole like discussion around financial literacy, I think is problematic. Just say that.
We don't teach our kids financial literacy. They teach everything in school but that. They should have a class on how to manage your money. But these schools here in San Francisco, they don't teach that. So they don't know what a credit, first credit card I got all my buddies and we went downtown and I bought everybody a pair of comics. I forgot about paying the bills. My mom and dad never sat me down and said, hey, when you get that card, you're only supposed to use 40% of it and you pay over the minimum payment so that your credit rating. I understand that now, but I didn't understand it then.
So it seems like a lot of the value of a basic income comes from doing it for everybody at once. All the time, no dependencies, no exceptions. It's universal. It's a universal basic income. But I actually think that questions like this are probably better answered by starting now and starting small rather than waiting for experiments in other countries to give us results that we're going to interpret and make policies based on and then make one big decision and go out and assume that it will be the same. I think that we've learned as a culture how to run lots of little experiments and to build up our understanding of people's actual experience over time. And I think that this is a great example of something that we should begin as soon as possible trying to get data on and really understand people's experience and what serves them best.
Let me say something. If you went to the sanctuary and you gave one person $1,000, one homeless person in that shelter, he'd probably share with a bunch of his buddies in there. They take care of each other. But imagine if you went there and gave everybody $1,000. It would last longer because he wouldn't have to share with everybody because everybody in there would have $1,000. But if you gave it to one person, you know, everybody in there would probably get $2, you know, because they'd be sharing. That's what they do. If you go out here on any corner, you see a group of like these homeless encampments, they're taking care of each other. So that $1,000 wouldn't go as far with one person. But if you gave them all that $1,000, they'd probably go buy a really, really nice big tents and all of them live in. And they'd have great meals for a long time.
Yeah, just a quick anecdote. We've actually seen that on the Hand Up platform.
Yeah.
Where an individual gets donations and they either didn't need it all or they didn't need it anymore, and they, instead of using it for something else for themselves, they ask that it be shared with other homeless individuals on our platform. So we definitely see that all the time.
Question in the back right there?
Yeah.
You?
So I'm wondering about the long-term vision of where this can go. And it was interesting how you brought up that like they would share rather than you know, keep it to themselves, because that's fundamentally different from how we function as a society. Like how cities are designed, like we go to work and then we come back home and you are isolated in your box. Whereas what you're talking about is like everybody's part of a community. Maybe that's how it was before, but everybody's part of a community and you're all contributing to this like one fluid, you know, like life. You know? So by giving this money to these people, like we want to give the money. Let's say we gave the money. Let's say we gave 10 grand to everybody. Like, where do we see this going? Are they going to assimilate into like what's going on in our current society? Are they going to live as their, you know, fluent? Do we want them to like get jobs like we have, or are we thinking like something different? Like, I mean, I'm not saying how like they and us were like different people. We're all people, but like what we're so bent on like getting them the money. Where are we taking this? Like, what is the vision with this? And I understand. I really agree with like the fail fast iteration thing, because like that's you know, we do that with startups, design thing, all that, like that's part of that. But like, where are we going with it?
So this question, like, what would society look like once we actually had this, or?
Yeah, what if today we have this? Like, what if we did? Like, where are they going to go? Where can we think? Like, how far can we take this with our imagination? Like, where are we going to go with it? Like, what if we just get over this one idea of like, okay, like we are over this hump that we gave them the money. It's happening. Let's act like it's happening. What next? You know, that's how you like, what next? Then it feels good, right? Okay, but now we're just sitting here, like, I mean, I don't know, I was like, but I'm curious.
Fascinating question. I think that affirmative vision of the future is probably, that we're going for, is probably an important thing for this community to articulate over lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of conversations like these with lots and lots and lots and lots of different people. But one assumption that I'm bringing to the conversation tonight is that we wouldn't have to work as much, and that some of the time that people feel like they have to spend working today because they're trying to pay the bills, because they're trying to get a little bit more money, to be a little bit more stable, to have an amount of capital that you can put to work in other ways rather than being paycheck to paycheck or just being trapped in a low capital place, is probably working a little less and spending a little bit more time with family and spending a little bit more time taking care of other people and spending a little bit more time playing, having fun, taking care of yourself. So I imagine that just a little bit less work goes a really, really, really long way for our quality of life. I think the weekend is a really good example of that.
You know, it's a beautiful thing when you can just be you. So if they probably we gave them $10,000, you'd see a bunch of people just doing them and doing what they want to do. You know, I think when they did the Social Security thing, they were like, what are they going to do? You know, it's going to break the country. And it didn't break the country. And then when they did this universal health care, if we take care of all the sick people and give them basic care, it's going to break the country. It didn't break the company. And if we gave all these people a foundation, it wouldn't break the country. And they could just be themselves and do what they want to do and just be a human being. It's just okay to be a human being. And they probably have more friends in this room because they had $10,000. Not that you guys would need their money, but people would look on them different. They get to be what we call normal. You know what I mean? You see them at the movie theater, just like you go to the movie theater, or at the ballpark, or taking their children to Fairyland, or to the park. They probably dress a little better. You know what I mean? Have a place to shower. Not in San Francisco, but some of them probably go off to a place like Detroit and buy a house for $10,000. They do normal things. It wouldn't change anything, but they'd be looked upon differently.
Yeah, I think it's actually a pretty poignant question. I think the answer is kind of like not a whole lot and a whole lot, right? Like, what was just said about we would see a lot of folks entering sort of the mainstream in a way that maybe the mainstream isn't ready for in terms of like services and resources. I think that causes a restructuring. And in terms of a whole lot, I think we have a society that presupposes that like a lot of people are going to attain a lot of wealth, and there's going to be a systematically under-resourced underclass who are going to need certain services. So I'd be out of a job. I'd love that. I would absolutely love that, to be out of a job and to not have people who are systematically under-resourced getting funneled into the criminal legal system. I don't call it the justice system because it's not, and then put into a program like ours, right? Like I would love to be out of a job in that sense. And so I think it causes like a pretty systematic rethinking of like the nonprofit industrial complex and how it's basically triage for not having these like a basic amount of income, on the front end. I went to Ontario to look at their education system, right? One of the like highest performing education systems in the world. And I asked one of the people in Ontario, I was like, how many education nonprofits do you have that's providing direct services to your young people? They were like, I guess we have like about 13. And I was like, 13 education nonprofits in this entire province, and probably, not that many more in the entire country. I probably walk by 13 education nonprofits on my walk to BART in Oakland every single day on the way to work, right? Like, because we've structured a society where there's such a paucity of resources at the basic level. And then we have to like have a bunch of rich people give a bunch of money. Love Tipping Point, thank you. And to nonprofits like mine who have to give those basic services instead of you just have the money you need. So.
I wanted to make 2 points on this. The first is some stats around, we heard some stats on poverty and here's some stats on homelessness. So about 3.5 million Americans experience homelessness every year. That's about 1% of the population. Of that 1%, 80% are transitionally homeless for less than a year. And, the people like this who raise money on handout, the family, and one of the partners lost their job, and now they found themselves homeless, and they're just like you, and you wouldn't even recognize them walking down the street. And now they're raising money to go back and get some job training so they can get their family back up off their feet. Only about 10% of the homeless population is chronically homeless. So that's about 10% of that 1%. And I think a lot of times when we think about poverty, we have this image of somebody on the street who has severe mental health issues, and that is real. But the vast majority of people who are experiencing poverty do not look like that. And I think it's just important to keep that in mind when you think about this question. The other thing I'd say is, I think one of the profound tragedies of our society is that most people do not enjoy how they spend their time. And most people do not enjoy where they work and what they do all day long. And so we live in this advanced civilization where most humans do not enjoy what they do. And when I think about the basic income, I think, what would it look like if everybody had the opportunity to say, you know what, no, I don't want to do that every day. I want to do this every day. I want to take care of my family every day. I want to make art every day. I want to be an entrepreneur. How many people would have the opportunity to be an entrepreneur who do not right now? Maybe we would see, even, I think a fear of the basic income is people would just work all day. Maybe we would see even more wealth and more value created. And we had a speaker out, Eric Olin-Wright, who's a sociologist who's been a supporter of the basic income for 30 years. He's in the Wikipedia entry for the basic income. And it was kind of cool. And one thing he said is, the experiments are great. And of course, as a sociologist, he would say this, the experiments are great, but you can only see how they affect the individual. You cannot see how they affect the society as a whole. And so what would it look like? That's definitely a place for imagination, and I hope that it looks like a world where people love their life and love being in their community and contributing.
All right, we have time for one more question. From the back there.
Right, so since you mentioned statistics, yes, this is one of the wealthiest cities tax states in the country, but it's also one of the highest tax states or cities in the world. Keeping that perspective in lens, so there's an economic question and there's a general question afterwards. The economic question is, one of the panelists mentioned the limits of the poverty line in the country. Do you feel through this, you will just be redefining the poverty line in a way, because at the end of the day, it's the same society. That's the economic question. The other question is, one of the panelists, I think the gentleman on the right said, they don't really have a choice because you have to meet their necessities. So just changing the lens on this a bit, is it really about basic income or is it more about basic expenses? What is their main concern with $15,000 or $15,000 that they will get? Is it basic income or basic expenses?
So questions were, one, does this shift the poverty line? And the second is are we talking about income or just covering expenses here?
I'll take a crack. So the amount of food stamps that you get every month is based on what is the name of it? It's called the Thrifty Meal Plan. Yeah, the Thrifty Meal Plan is defined by the Federal Nutrition Service as what you should be able to afford. And it is not much at all. And so the poverty line and things like that, these are federal measures of our ability to meet our basic needs. It's not a relative scale. And I think that's an important thing. There's an objective amount. Now, putting more money into the system changes prices, changes consumer behavior. There's complex economic consequences that I am not equipped to speak to. But as far as the first part of your question, I don't think it would just shift. The second thing, I can't even remember the second part of the question. What was the second part of the question? Let's say it one more time. Basic income or basic needs? Great question. Yeah. I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, but just one thing that I have thought about and that I've heard people discuss in this community or around this community is what would it mean to radically reduce the cost of housing? So rather than giving people more money to spend, what if we made the necessities of life radically cheaper and giving people that don't have the ability to afford a stable home the ability to do that?
Yeah, I'd just add to that and say, I think to your second question, I hope it's both. I hope we get universal basic income, and also we can guarantee universal pre-K for all of our kids, which we don't have right now in our city and this region, which is insane. So I hope that we find other ways to address people's needs. But to your first question about redefining the poverty line, I think that's a great question. And again, I see universal basic income as, I think for people who are asseted, who have like resources and family support and other types of things, like it could allow me to be like, okay, I'm just gonna like not work for 9 months or whatever, and just like take time off, explore. But I think for folks that are experiencing or in poverty or on the cusp of poverty, again, it's a net for them that doesn't exist right now. And so we're not kind of saying just redefining a poverty line, it's simply giving people a support to not fall into poverty.
I'll just add a comment to this. I think that's an interesting point that, standard of living changes and, what does that mean for something like the basic income? But I'd say like clearly right now, the basic needs are not met. And I share this anecdote because most people actually don't know it. Here in San Francisco, about 4,000, well, there are about 7,000 people who are experiencing homelessness. About 4,000 of them are sleeping on the streets. We have 1,100 shelter beds only in this city. Every day, people are lined up waiting to get a bed that they may or may not get, and sometimes waiting for hours. I've seen homeless individuals who come out of the hospital and are put right back on the street because the respite programs are full. We are nowhere near like having the basic needs level met. And so, yeah, I would love to see that happen, and what it means beyond that, I don't know.
To give those that don't have something, that's a powerful thing, and I really don't give a damn about how high the cost of living goes up for other people and that. But to give that group of people that don't have, they're living off of $200 in food stamps and $62 a month, and if you gave them $10,000 or $15,000 or a monthly income where they can kind of relax and not live on the street and everything, I think it's 24,000 homeless people in San Francisco, because there are some people that just don't want to be counted. They're couch surfing, going from, they're with a brother, and the sister comes with a bunch of kids, so they don't have to be on the street, and the brother puts himself in jeopardy because he's breaking his lease by having 4 extra people living there. So, they all might end up homeless. I'm more concerned with giving those that don't have something and let them, enjoy life for a change and everything. And we never know, this will really piss people off if we get some Zuckerbergs and Bill Gates come out of that, take that $15,000 and really make something happen with it. That's what they're afraid of. But if you give, just to give them something, imagine yourself sleeping on the sidewalk in a tent, people walking by and the cops coming by, slicing your tent up so you don't. And then somebody started to GoFund so you can get another tent just to have a place. Imagine yourself on the streets like that. And I guarantee if you gave them $10,000 or $15,000, that's the first thing they're going to do is go get a nice, comfortable place to sleep. And I just want to see that, the hell with all the ramifications it'll have. Society will adjust. They really will.
I think 3 things in response. One is just like the poverty measure, as has been mentioned, is like a arbitrary policy decision that arguably needs to be revised, that like many other countries elsewhere use a relative poverty measure, and we just need to fix that. It's just we use the wrong measure, and it drastically underestimates what people are experiencing in terms of their actual lived experience, I think. The second thing I think is that, I think Rose mentioned this, is that like yeah, it's basic income to meet basic expenses and basic needs. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's like one to meet the other. And I think that, you know, as advanced as we are, as all these like cool apps that we have and all this good stuff, like we still haven't figured out a way to like have a huge swath of our society not suffer every day to figure out how they're going to meet their basic expenses. So for all the cool shit we have and the 35 different brands of deodorant and everything else that we got going on, we still haven't figured out that basic thing. That's crazy, right? So I think that that's what like basic income sort of puts to the side. And then I think that the third point is just around like, it's an important reframing, right? Now our current framing is like, what's the poverty line? What's the minimum wage? Which is like the worst phrase for a policy decision ever, right? Like imagine if you're like a mother of three, you have to go home every night and look your kids in the eye and say, I am making the absolute legal minimum that any employer is allowed to pay me based on what the government dictates. That's awful. So basic income flips that and says like, this is a basic standard of living that we say we're going to honor in society and uphold in society because we value human life at this level at the very least. That's a totally different reframing than like, this is the bare minimum that we think any human can survive on. I think that's a really important reframing in terms of policy and just like human rights.
All right, well, sadly, we are out of time, but let's have a huge round of applause for our panelists. So folks are welcome to stick around. We still have some food and drinks left, I think, and to mingle and chat. And yeah, glad everyone could make it.
Questions? I'm trying to stop here. You go around.